The day my son-in-law stood in my kitchen and called my daughter a liar, in front of me, in front of her newborn baby, in front of God and everyone, was the day I understood that some men don't just break your heart. They break something you can't name, something you didn't even know was there until it's gone. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to where this really started. My daughter, I'll call her my baby girl, because that's what she'll always be to me, no matter that she's 34 years old and has 2 graduate degrees. She met her husband at a work conference in Denver. She was presenting a paper on healthcare policy. He was there schmoozing clients for his family's commercial real estate firm. She called me that night from the hotel, and I remember exactly what she said. She said, "Mom, I met someone, and I don't know what to do about it." That was not like her. My daughter is not the kind of woman who gets rattled by a man. She raised herself half the time, if I'm honest, because her father and I went through a rough patch when she was in middle school, and neither of us was as present as we should have been. She learned early to be self-sufficient. She graduated top of her class. She does not call her mother from hotel rooms to say she doesn't know what to do. So I paid attention. His name was Philip. No, wait. I need to stop myself. I've been telling this story for months now to my sister, to my friend at church, to my neighbor who brings me tomatoes from her garden every August. I keep using his name like it costs me nothing. It costs me something. So I'll call him what my granddaughter calls him now, which is nothing, because she's only 8 months old and doesn't know he exists yet in any real sense. I'll just call him my son-in-law, or my former son-in-law. I haven't decided which one feels more accurate. He came from money. Old money, the kind that doesn't flash itself around but sits quiet in the room like a draft you can't find the source of. His parents had a house outside of Charleston, South Carolina. Not the showy new construction kind, but a real house, the kind with a history that wasn't always comfortable to look at. His mother was polite to my daughter in the way that very controlled women are polite to people they've already decided aren't good enough. I noticed it the first Thanksgiving we spent together. She never said anything wrong. That was the problem. Everything she said was perfectly calibrated to make my daughter feel like a guest in a place where she should have been family. My daughter didn't complain. That's not her way. She adapted. She's good at adapting. They got married in the spring, 2 years after Denver. Small ceremonies, which surprised me. His family had the means for something grander. But my daughter wanted simple, and for once he listened to her. I cried at the wedding. I'm not ashamed of that. He was charming and he looked at her like she was something worth looking at, and I thought, okay. Maybe this is the one. The pregnancy came about a year into the marriage. My daughter called me on a Tuesday morning, which was unusual. She usually texts, and I could hear it in her voice before she even said the words. That specific kind of happiness that's also terrifying. I drove up to see her that weekend. We sat on her back porch with decaf coffee and talked for 4 hours about nothing and everything. It was one of the best weekends of my life. Things changed after that. I don't know how to explain it except to say that something shifted in him when the pregnancy became visible. Not immediately. The first trimester was fine. But somewhere around month 4 or 5, he started pulling back. Working later, coming home with a tension in his jaw that he didn't used to carry. My daughter mentioned it to me once, carefully, like she was testing how it sounded out loud. She said, "He's been stressed about the Hargrove deal," and I said, "Is that what it is?" And she said, "I think so. I didn't push it. I should have pushed it." What I didn't know, what my daughter didn't know, was that his younger brother had been saying things to him, planting things. I found all of this out later, pieced together from different conversations, the way you piece together what happened at an accident scene after the fact. His brother, and I want to be careful here because I am 62 years old, and I was raised not to speak ill of people, but I also lived long enough to know that some people are genuinely cruel, and dressing it up in careful language doesn't serve anyone. His brother had decided, for reasons I still don't fully understand, that my daughter wasn't good enough for their family. And when a man like that decides something, He doesn't just think it. He works at it. He started with small things. A comment here. A question there. He'd tell my son-in-law that he'd seen my daughter having lunch with a man from her office. Which was true, she had lunch with colleagues. She worked in healthcare policies. She had colleagues. But the way he framed it, the way he kept coming back to it, the little seeds he kept pressing into the soil. I want you to understand that this kind of thing is a deliberate act. It is not gossip. It is a campaign. By the time my daughter was 7 months along, my son-in-law had been quietly convinced that the baby might not be his. She didn't know that. She went to her prenatal appointments alone because he was busy. She painted the nursery herself because he kept finding reasons not to start. She called me sometimes at night, and she didn't say she was scared, but I could hear it underneath the words she chose. I drove up 3 weekends in a row and I helped her put together the crib and hang the little curtains with the yellow ducks on them, and I told her everything was going to be fine. I believed that when I said it. I want you to know I believed it. My granddaughter was born on a Wednesday in November, during a cold snap that frosted all the windows. She came into the world at 6:47 in the morning, and she was perfect. 7 pounds, 2 ounces. She had my daughter's nose and this incredible head of dark hair. And she looked at me, the first time I held her, like she already knew me, like she'd been waiting. My son-in-law was there for the birth. I'll give him that. He held the baby. He took the pictures. He cried. Actually, I saw him cry, and I thought, see, this is the moment. This is when it becomes real. This is when whatever nonsense his brother has been feeding him just falls away, because you cannot hold a child and keep that kind of poison going. I was wrong. 3 days after they came home from the hospital, while my daughter was still healing, still exhausted in the way that only new mothers understand, while she was sitting on the couch with the baby at her breast and trying to figure out how to do the most natural thing in the world, that was when he did it. He came into the living room and he sat down across from her and he said he wanted a DNA test. I was in the kitchen. I heard everything. My daughter went quiet for a moment. The kind of quiet that isn't calm. It's the quiet of a person trying to understand something that doesn't make sense in any language they speak. Then she said, "What did you say?" He said it again. He said he needed to be sure. He said his brother had raised some concerns. He said he wasn't accusing her of anything. He just needed peace of mind. He used that phrase, peace of mind, like this was a reasonable thing. Like he was talking about a financial investment and not about his wife, who had just spent 9 months growing their child and 22 hours in labor and 3 days trying to recover while running on no sleep and sheer love. I put down the dish towel I was holding and I walked into that living room. I am not a dramatic woman. I don't raise my voice often. My own mother raised me to handle things quietly, to keep your dignity, to choose your words. I have lived by that for 6 decades. I looked at my son-in-law and I said, "You need to think very carefully about what you're doing right now." He looked at me with this expression. I don't have the right word for it. Not guilt, exactly. More like irritation. Like I was an inconvenience. Like I was something that had gotten between him and what he wanted. He said, "This is between me and my wife. And my daughter, my strong, brilliant, self-sufficient daughter, who I raised to need no one's permission for anything." My daughter looked at me with her baby in her arms and her eyes full of something I hadn't seen since she was a little girl, and she said, "It's okay, Mom." It was not okay. But I stepped back because she asked me to. Because it was her life and her marriage and her choice, and I had to respect that even when every bone in my body was screaming at me not to. The test was ordered. My son-in-law arranged it through some private company, not through the pediatrician, not through any normal channel, but through a service his brother had found, which should have told us something right there. A DNA collector came to the house. My daughter submitted to it with a quietness that I think was the most dignified thing I have ever witnessed in my life. She didn't cry. She didn't argue. She held her daughter and she answered the collector's questions and she signed the forms. The results were supposed to take 7 to 10 business days. In those 10 days, my son-in-law barely spoke to her. He slept in the guest room. He would come home from work and eat dinner and disappear. My daughter continued to wake up every 2 and 3 hours with the baby. She texted me every morning. She never once said she was angry or scared or broken. She sent me pictures of the baby. She sent me pictures of the baby's hands. Specifically, she said they were the funniest, most perfect little hands she'd ever seen in her life. I drove up on day 7. I didn't ask permission. I just came. When I got there, she opened the door and she looked at me and she said, "I'm glad you're here." And I thought, that's enough. Whatever happens, that's enough. The results came on a Thursday. My son-in-law opened the email at the kitchen table while my daughter and I were in the living room. I heard the chair scrape. Then, silence. A long silence. Then he came to the doorway. My daughter looked up at him. He said, "She's mine." And then he said, "And this is the part that I think about at night that I will think about for the rest of my life." He said, "I'm sorry. I should never have doubted you." My daughter nodded. She said, "No, you shouldn't have." And then she said, very calmly, "I need you to leave." He thought she meant for the evening. He started to say something about giving her space, about talking it through tomorrow. She said, I need you to leave this house. Tonight. I'll have my mother here. We'll be fine." He left. What came out afterward, and this took several weeks and several conversations and ultimately the involvement of a family attorney, was something that changed how I understood the whole story. The DNA test had confirmed that my son-in-law was the baby's father. But while the testing company was processing the sample, they had flagged something unusual in the familial comparison data. His brother, who had apparently submitted his own genetic profile to the same pry company some years earlier for a genealogy service, was in their database. And the markers told a story that no one in that family had been prepared to hear. The man who had spent 6 months convincing my son-in-law that my daughter was a liar, that the baby wasn't his, that he needed to protect himself from his own wife. That man was not fully who he said he was in the family. There was a paternity discrepancy that went back a generation. Something in that family's history that had never been spoken aloud was now, suddenly, unavoidable. I'm not going to pretend I took no satisfaction in that. I'm 62, not a saint. His mother called my daughter. It was the first time she had ever called her without a prompt, without a social occasion, without a reason that served the family. She called and she apologized, not for her younger son specifically. She's too careful a woman to be that direct. She apologized for the way things had been handled. My daughter thanked her and ended the call. His brother has not apologized. I don't think he will. Some people are so committed to the version of themselves they've built that the truth just bounces off them. He's found other things to be angry about. That's not my daughter's problem anymore. My son-in-law, I'll say this for him, and it's the most charitable thing I have, so I'm choosing it carefully. He did not try to minimize what he had done. He went to a therapist. He signed whatever my daughter needed him to sign. He agreed to every term she put forward for co-parenting without argument. When they worked out the custody arrangement, he showed up to every meeting, and he was respectful, and he did not try to use his family's resources to overpower her. Maybe that's the bare minimum. Maybe the bare minimum shouldn't earn credit, but I've seen men in that position do far worse, so I'll acknowledge it for what it is. My daughter kept the house. It was in her name. She'd insisted on that before the wedding, quietly, without drama, because she is the kind of woman who reads the paperwork. He moved into an apartment 20 minutes away. He sees the baby twice a week and every other weekend. My daughter sends me pictures of the handoffs sometimes. She stands at the front door and watches him drive away. And she looks okay. She looks like herself. I moved in for the first 3 months. I slept in the nursery in the recliner they'd bought for night feedings, and I watched my granddaughter breathe in the dark, and I thought about all the ways love is also just presence, just showing up, just staying. There is something I want to say to anyone watching this who has been where my daughter was. Not the famous version, not the cleaned-up version, but the real one, sitting on your couch 3 days after giving birth, still sore, still bleeding, still figuring out how to feed a human being with your body. and having the person who is supposed to be your partner look at you like you're a suspect. You are not a suspect. You are not what someone's doubt makes you. You are not required to shrink yourself to fit inside someone else's fear. My daughter knew who she was the whole time. She never stopped knowing. She just had to wait for the rest of the world to catch up. My granddaughter is 8 months old now. She has started pulling herself up on the coffee table, which sends my daughter into a state somewhere between delight and cardiac arrest every time it happens. She has 4 teeth coming in at once, and she is furious about it, loudly and frequently, and I have never loved anything more than I love her fury. She is going to be something. I don't know what exactly. I just know she's going to be something. I call my daughter every Tuesday. We talk for an hour, sometimes more. We talk about the baby, and about her work, and about nothing. The good nothing, the comfortable kind. Last Tuesday she said, "Mom, I think I'm actually happy." She sounded surprised, like happiness was something she'd misplaced, and wasn't sure she'd recognize if she found it. I said, "I know, baby, I know you are," and I meant it. The same way I believed it when I told her everything was going to be fine, except this time, it already was.